Floyd
Sean
life.
Charles.
You gotta stay in the driver's seat of your life. You gotta command your life. You have to grab that steering wheel. Using God's your GPS. You gonna have to grab that steering wheel and take control of what you're doing. Take responsibility for your actions. Make yourself accountable. Give permission to the people around you to hold you accountable. God loves us. God loves us so much. He will send people around us to bless us, to show us how much He loves us, help guide us, help feed us. We gotta learn how to receive that love. We gotta stay healthy enough to receive that love. Feed our good wolf and know how to give it. Know how to stay in community. God loves us. God loves us.
Yeah.
So, speaks life.
Word up, yo. This is Jay Floyd, man, and welcome to another episode of Jay Floyd Speaks Life, the podcast, man. Welcome to everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, whether you're listening on SoundCloud, whether you're listening on Google Podcasts, or whether you're listening on YouTube or any other, Castbox, whatever it is, man. I thank you for hopping into my family room with me, man, and sitting down and chopping it up about life, man. I'm a firm believer that we need to do this more often, man. We need to just transparently talk about life. We need to build together and understand that the things that we going through, man, other people are going through, whenever we go through something hard and we start thinking, man, it's just me, man. It's just me, man. My life is jacked up. Nobody's going to understand this. I'm embarrassed to talk about it. That's always the wrong way. That's just the way that, the enemy plays with our ego to start making us think we so special that even our problems are unique. Nobody will understand them, and that's not the case, man. So thank you again, man. This is another episode where I'm going to sit down and just chop it up with y'all. Just talk, man. This is one of the things I like to do. When you see the advertisements for the Jay Floyd Speaks Life podcast, it says this is interviews and encouragement, man. So these ones are encouragement. This is the second part of my series called When Jay Met God. And I know a lot, anybody who's listening to these things, those people who may have known me earlier in my life, in my teens or in my 20s, I mean, maybe even my early 30s, man. Anybody who knew me in those times, they knew a kid who was a little kind of lost, very vocal and outspoken, always opinionated. I never have been shy to run my mouth about what I feel. I'm not always the one that's out there looking for attention, but I've always been vocal about my opinion, especially when it comes to philosophy, different schools of thought. So a lot of people might see me and, they're like, man, I can't believe that he finally settled on something. You know what I mean? He believes in something. And I do. It took me a long time, man, to really understand what I feel was God really just kind of slowly ensuring my steps and making sure I was covered and giving me more than ample opportunity to turn around and see Him and start doing things His way, or at least trying to do things His way, So, when me meeting God, when Jay met God, these are great examples of the times when I was not up in a church. I was not speaking on nobody's stage. I was not giving seminars, writing books. But God was still faithful to show up and show me and give me an opportunity to see His face and see who He is and what He can do. You know, so we're gonna go through that. We're gonna hit on part 2 of that, man. Like I said, I'm glad y'all chopped it up with me. Y'all sat down with me here in the family room segment. Just to update you guys, man. I'm sorry I haven't had a podcast episode in a minute. You know, it's been a couple of weeks. I have some new content up. You know, check out my YouTube page. I'm streaming all of my content there. All of my podcast episodes, all of my interviews, all of my speaking engagements that are recorded, everything goes there. So, you know, give anybody who digs my message, man, the chance to go to one place, man. Just go one place and see everything I'm talking about, you know. So go check out J. Floyd Speaks Life, man. Subscribe. Make sure you click subscribe. And if you're listening to this, man, go ahead and click subscribe on your podcast provider. You know, do them a favor and link me up. Make sure you stay loyal and listen to whatever outlet you're getting this on, man. You know, like I said, it's been a minute since I had one of these episodes. I've been working hard, though. You know, I got a couple of books in the works. Also, I am making my acting debut, man. You know, my acting debut, my feature. I'm going to step right into a feature film. And I thank God, man. I just got to give all glory to God. You know, my first time, you know, just to give a full background, the first time I ever acted in something, my man Myron Davis cast me in a music video, you know, and that was just last year to play this father of a teen in a music video. And right off of that, Myron suggested that I go down and, you know, audition for this TV show that was coming up on CBS, you know, affiliated with Empire. And I went down and did that, and I got it. You know, my first role, I got it. You know, now there's still some things going on with that, as far as when it's going to be shooting or if it's going to pick back up. But I feel blessed that I was able to step into that. And so off the strength of that, I went and my man Mike Berry is filming this movie called A State of Mind, and it's all about mental health awareness and dealing with depression and generational curses and black men and dealing and being able to talk about things and not being able to talk about their feelings and how that works and how that plays out. You know, and Mike Berry, you know, me and him, we walk in similar lanes, you know, doing the motivation thing. So I keep tabs on Mike, you know, and he had saw me out there. So I saw he was working on this movie. I went down and I auditioned, and I actually auditioned for a much smaller part. He saw something in me and gave me a larger role. So I'm engaged in that as we speak. I'll be filming. We just filmed my first shoot day a couple of days ago, and I'll be filming again tomorrow, and then the next day, and the next day after that. And we're going to do this thing, man. You know, it's got Elise Neal in it. It's got some great actors in it, man, doing their thing. And I'm excited, man. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for that. We're going to try to really do some great things with a conference, man. I really want to get some dudes in there in a conference, man. But speaking of my acting, you know, my acting debuts, you know, my man Myron Davis gave me that opportunity. And, you know, Myron is going to be one of my next guests. But before we do that, let's get right into, you know, When Jay Met God Part 2. So let's do this, y'all.
J. Floyd Speaks Life. J. Floyd is a husband, father, and follower of Christ. After enduring several tragedies at an early age, he faced depression and anxiety for years. After being led down the path of healing himself, he realized that his purpose is to use his words, his life, and his testimony to help others make similar journeys to healing through God's love. Jay is a Christian self-help author, speaker, and life coach. On this podcast, he will sit down with people you may know through TV or social media, walking in their purpose as they talk about what makes them who they are and simply speak about life. On J. Floyd Speaks Life.
Yo, shout out to Sam Goody, who's one of Cleveland's finest. He's out in California right now. He produced the track for that interlude. My man Sean Charles produced my main theme song. So shout out to those dudes making music, man. I was in music for a long time, near and dear to my heart, and I still got a lot of friends in that industry. So shout out to all those dudes who hooked me up with those. Like I said earlier, man, this here is a series, and it's part 2. I'm not sure how many times I'm going to keep going. There are a couple of more stories, but I do got to get back into my interviews, man, and really shine some light on some other people's stories, man. Plus, to be completely honest with you, one of the tough things about this, I just told a lot of my story on the on WOVU on the Jewels and His Crown show. They had me on, and then the next week they had me and my wife on. And I told a lot of my story. To be honest, man, it really it's difficult sometimes to tell the story because you want to give the full breadth of what happened, and you want to give the full impact of it. But it's it's your story, and it's tough, and sometimes there's some pain, and then there's what I call God's presence in it. It's God's speed up in there. When you're talking about things with God, you've been delivered, and God does a lot of the work, but we're talking about things of a higher power. And when you're talking about things of a higher power, sometimes, our mind can't comprehend it. It's difficult. It's a stretch. It's tough. It's tough to walk in that because our minds are limited. Our spirits are limited, and it kind of makes us weary a little bit. So we just got to lean on the Lord. Don't lean on our own understanding. But for me, I feel to be a servant leader, to be a great leader is to be a servant leader. And to be a servant leader means I'm going to keep giving this story anytime it can help somebody, even if one person hears it and is uplifted by it. So with no further ado, let's talk about, the second time that I met God, man. Anybody who's read my book, The Poet Who Watched the Whole Parade, my first book, is my life story. So much of my life at a certain speed started happening June 7th, 1992. And what happened on that night was my only brother, Julius Floyd II, he was murdered. He was murdered by gun violence, sitting in the passenger side of a car, and he was shot multiple times. And, my mom and I were alerted, and we had to go down and go through what the horrific trial that anybody who's lost someone to gun violence knows all too well. But leading up to that, I lived a very unique life, and my brother and I, we were 3.5 years apart. He was older, he was bigger, he was taller, he was more outspoken, he was more gregarious, he was more outspoken, he was more daring, he was more. Everything about him was just turned up a couple of or 20 notches. A lot of people loved him. A lot of people hated him. He could really make you feel something. He didn't go under the radar at all. So, growing up with a person like that, it was difficult, and we were steeped in, we're talking about 1980s Cleveland, Ohio, Midwest American black culture, inner city community, inner city trying to escape to suburban areas during a white flight era culture. So much of our culture was informed by television. One of the things that I talk about a lot of people don't know is, part of Ronald Reagan's presidency, one of the staples of it was, what's called Reaganomics nowadays, is trickle down economics. But one of the key components of that was that he loosened up FCC regulations, which means the Federal Communications Committee is, their regulations of advertisement, TV and radio advertisement, comic book advertisement, all of that stuff. He loosened them, which means, big companies like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Nike, all of the Mattel, the toy companies, Hasbro, these companies began to have the ability to market and advertise basically however they wanted. They could basically say whatever they wanted about a competitor. Things were not as loose. You could lie. You could kind of stretch the truth in your advertisement, man. You could put you could advertise a Big Mac, but what you're showing is, not necessarily a real burger. You could do those kind of things, which led to a kind of a golden age in American advertising. If you ask anybody in, whether from age 30 till about age 50, if you ask those kind of people that age, ask them what they remember about their childhood, and a lot of it will be jingles. It will be advertisements. It'll be cartoons. It'll be brands. It'll be slogans. It'll be mascots. It'll be logos. Those are the kind of marketing things that we got inundated with. And so growing up, that affected black community a lot. And with the birth of hip hop happening in the late 70s, it just spawned right. It was like a perfect marriage. So, growing up with my brother, we were so ingrained in, so much of television and advertising and, anything that was heavily marketed to us, and we would dive right in, and that you pour all of that in on top of, so now you have kids that want to eat at McDonald's every day, and kids that want to drive, they want to ride on the BMX bike, they want to ride on a Huffy, and they want to go watch Hulk Hogan wrestle, and they want to go, eat the latest Post cereal that has the Flintstones on it, and they want to go to the ice cream store and get the latest treat with this face on it, and you pour all that on. The natural thing of now we have a black community that's moving out of the ghetto, moving out of the hood, and starting to get a foothold into some suburbs. So in the city of Cleveland, you had a lot of people, my family being one of them, who were able to make their way out of some really bad neighborhoods and go into the suburbs. So we did that, 1986. Well, actually, there was kind of two. So 1984, we moved into one suburb. In 1986, we moved into a further suburb. And that, for me, at the time, I was 8 on the first move and 10 on the second move. So for me, it was like perfect. It was like, this was great. I always wanted that life of a TV show. I wanted to be like Different Strokes, like the Cosby Show, But then now that I think back on it, you look at my brother when we moved, at those ages, he's 12 and 14. So those are a little different. So he's bringing along a little bit more of it than I am, right? So, as we're growing up, man, he's a little bit more of an alpha. He's still bringing a little bit more of where we came from into how he answers and solves his problems. And, next thing you know, we have a violence issue. We're, middle school, fight here, fight there, fight here, fight there. My brother became this figure that was shrouded in violence. He also had a ton of friends. It was a very, very stark dichotomy that he was running there, And I say all this just to build up the correct context for who we were, right? So as we're growing up, I think it was 4th grade. And once I got into 4th grade, I took a class, home ec. And I remember in home ec, they taught us how to sew. And so, you'd have to we didn't have a whole lot of money. So those kind of things always made me nervous. Anytime the teacher would say, hey, we have a project and you're going to have to go to whatever I can't even remember the name of the craft store. You're going to have to go and get a latch hook set. You're going to have to go and get a sewing kit. I was always a little nervous because, we didn't have much money, man. And it was like, my mom was not great at managing finances. So it was up in the air whether I could do those things or not. So, one of those times came up and the teacher said, go get a sewing kit, and whatever you get, they got some teddy bears, some baby dolls, some whatevers, with pillows, whatever you get, that's what you're going to sew. I'm going to teach you how to sew this thing. So, I got the thing. Mine just happened to be like a teddy bear. I got the thing, and I was ahead of the game because my mom grew up in the 50s, and as a woman in the 50s, she was taught to sew primarily. It's one of the sew and cook and clean were the things that they would teach her mainly. That's the only options they thought women could have at the time. So by the time she was older, that had changed, but she still had those primary skills. So she had already taught my brother and I how to sew. She felt that it was important that we knew how to sew. She didn't have any girls to raise, so she taught us. So I was a little ahead of the game. So I sewed this teddy bear really pretty good. I think I got an A on the project. I was pretty good. I came home. I was pretty proud of it. Showed my mom. She loved it. Walking back to my room, and my brother just happened to see me walking with this teddy bear. And he's like, man, what is that? And I'm like, yeah, I'm taking home ec, 4th grade. I got home economics, and here's what I'm going to do. Here's what's happening. Got this teddy bear, and he just like clowned me, straight clowned me, man. He was like, man, that thing is so gay. That's so soft. It's so whack, man. Get it out of here. Don't let me catch you with that teddy bear around here. It's the worst thing. Don't do it. And so I was just like kind of like devastated, like, all right, it wasn't the first time something like that had happened. If I flash back to, I can remember once I was running when I was in kindergarten. I was running on the playground and I had on a shirt that was too big for me. And so I took the shirt and I tied it up right above my belly button. I just tied it in a knot. That way it wouldn't like flail everywhere as I was running. And my brother just happened to be at that same park, and he saw me, and he came over and he just untied it. And he's like, don't let me see you doing that. That's what gay people do. And I was like, wow, okay. So I'm learning these things, this toxic masculinity that's being passed down, to my brother, and he's absorbing it, because we don't have a father figure in the house because my parents were divorced. So he's absorbing it from wherever he's getting it, his older friends, cousins or whatever. He's absorbing it. And then he's trying to be the man of the house, and he's cranking it back out as a kid. He's, it's not mature. It's just, he's chewed it up real quick, saw it somewhere, chewed it up, spit it back out on me. And so, he's like, yeah, don't let me see you with this teddy bear. So I took the teddy bear and I was like, you know what? My mom liked this thing. She was so happy that I made it. So let me just go ahead and say, Mom, I got this for you. This is completely for you. I made it for you. And you take it and, as a symbol of me loving you. I was such a mama's boy. That was no problem. My mom was like, absolutely. She took it, kept it with her things. We move on. You fast forward probably about a year or two, I'm in around 6th or 7th grade or so. And, as I was growing up, I had a blanket, those small throws that you can buy them now, like anywhere, they have them everywhere. They're just small blanket that's maybe like 4 feet by, 4 by 6 or something. I don't know, 4 by 4, whatever it was. It's a small throw, not large enough for an adult to really rock with, but for a kid, you can rock with it. So as a kid, I would carry this thing a lot, man. Maybe, I wouldn't say I was Linus level with it. It was not a crutch for me. It wasn't a security blanket, but it was something special for me because the thing about it for me is because I was the smallest person in the family. And because there was such a stark difference between me and my brother in size, I kind of, being small, being a little dude of the family was kind of part of my identity. So I kind of liked that this blanket, fit me, I didn't have many things that was just for me. So that was my thing. So I kind of held on to the blanket. It was a little special. So as I got older, my brother was like, man, this blanket's got to go. You keep carrying this blanket around, you know what I mean? A couple of things he didn't like for me to do was play with toys as I got older and have this blanket. So in order to solve, I wasn't about to give up playing with toys, man. I loved playing with my G.I. Joes, even as I got older, man. Once I hit like 13, 14, I still like my G.I. Joes. I wasn't going to give them up. He didn't like that. But, the blanket, I figured out a solution for. I noticed that as my mom was getting older, she was about 40 years older than me. I noticed as she was getting older, one of the things would happen to her, she would really have a lot of, she'd get cold really fast. Her legs would be cold. So I was like, okay, I can give this to my mom as, it's just big enough to throw over your legs, ma, and keep you warm. And she loved it. She's like, this is great. I appreciate it. Problem solved, in my opinion. So, this is about age 13. You fast forward, June 7th, 1992. I was 16 years old. My brother was 19, almost 20. And, we get this news that he's been involved in a shooting, right? We go down hoping for the best, and the news is the worst. He did not make it. He did not survive the shooting. So my mom is devastated. This is years after all of the things that we've been through. We had our ups and downs. We had our trials, our tribulations. But this was my mom's firstborn, man, and this was tough. This was really tough. She didn't know how she was going to make it, so we didn't go back home because my mom felt like she couldn't deal with seeing his bedroom, look in like it was in the condition that he left it. There's too many memories there, too difficult. So we didn't go back home. We went to families' houses, and, I remember sleeping in a few recliners and watching a bunch of VHSs late into the night and not sleeping much. And, a few weeks went by. And finally, I don't know if maybe I suggested it. I probably did, because one of the things that was driving me was I was really hurt, but part of me was just like, man, I wish we could just get back to normal. I wish we could just get back home or something, And so I didn't know what I would do after I got home, but I'm like, I just want to get home, man. I just want to be normal again. So I finally talked my mom into going home. This was probably 2 or 3 weeks after his service. We arrive at this porch and we go to open the door. My mom unlocks the front door. And as we slide open the door, we look down, and right in front of the door is that blanket folded neatly in a little square with the teddy bear sitting on top of it. Now, to put this in full context, I gave that teddy bear to my mom in the 4th grade, which means around 6 years before this day. And, my mom had loved it and put it somewhere. And then finally it ended up in an attic in storage. And that blanket I had given her maybe 3 years before, 2 or 3 years before this day. And, it had gotten its use, and then it was away in storage as well. So to walk in and see this blanket laying on the floor, folded with the teddy bear on top of it, was a powerful, powerful moment. Probably one of the most impactful moments of my life. In the moment, you have my mom, grieving mother, and then you have me, grieving little brother who wants to get back to his life, and his psyche is telling him, why can't we just rewind and go back to how we used to be? So we're standing there, and my mom obviously is in her broken state. This is way too much. So she freaks out. She just like steps back. She can't handle it. She's crying. I'm trying to console her, but in the moment, I had zero doubt what was going on. Like, it was so clear. I was not afraid at all. I was not afraid. I knew that this was a message for me. The one thing I can say I felt was a sense of responsibility, because I looked at those two and my brain worked fast enough. Thank you, Holy Spirit. My brain worked fast enough to add 2 and 2 together and say, look, that was a blanket you gave your mom after your brother ridiculed it. That was a blanket you gave your mom to look out for her. That was a teddy bear you gave your mom after your brother ridiculed it. You gave it to her to make her feel better. What he's trying to say is, you're going to have to be there for your mom. You're going to have to do it. These were just symbols, and now you're going to have to do it in a larger way. And right in that moment, at the time, I will say this, I did have some questions, because I wondered, how can my brother do this? How did he do it when he's not alive anymore? So, I asked a couple of people around, can spirits move? Can spirits move things? Can spirits come back? And I talked to people, and they, some people gave me some advice, and I took it to heart, man, but now, as a much older person who's been around enough things and absorbed enough other words and lessons from God and the Holy Spirit, and now I understand that God can do whatever he wants to do. God can move however he wants to move. And one of the ways that God usually chooses to move is to look out for his children and give and provide them what they need. And that message was so clear to me in that moment. And I knew that God sent that message for me. Now, to complete the story, my mom never fully recovered from losing my brother. If you've ever heard of someone dying of a broken heart, she did just that. My mom passed away 5 years after my brother passed away. And in those 5 years, she was never the same. She never got back to what she was when he was alive. And it's unrealistic to even expect. But she was a shell of herself. And she really, really just cared about me and my well-being, keeping me safe. And I really did have to be there for her. She struggled emotionally. She struggled psychologically. She actually had some underlying psychological issues that the entire ordeal just kind of exacerbated it and sped them along. So, it was incumbent upon me to truly be there for my mom in those 5 years. I could have, I really struggled with the fact that I was a teenager in high school. And now here, my mom is struggling in such a big way. We end up homeless. We end up living in hotels. My mom ends up living in a car, and she ends up living in homeless shelters. And I get sent to live with other people and sleep on their floors and stuff. And, and through all of this, I had to find the strength from God to help her and be with her and show her that she was loved. And I see now exactly why that was the message. I see why that was the message. And now, even now, and I have to, I find myself, I find it incumbent upon me to share the story of who they were. I'm always extremely honest of my experience with them. I don't try to sugarcoat it and act like they were angels walking this earth that never did anything wrong or never hurt anybody. I try to tell it honest because that's the way that God moves. We all have flaws. We all have things we can improve. And God is so merciful and so gracious that he allows us to be who we are and still give us what we need to get better. And when we lean on him and not on our own understanding, and in all of our ways, we acknowledge him, then he will order our steps. And I've found that to be extremely true. even with a delayed start, and a kid who was cocky in a philosophical way, and being a kid who was defiant, and being a kid who was hurt, who was really hurt, and a kid who wanted to strike out and ask God, why did I lose my parents, and why did I lose my brother in such a traumatic way? Into understanding what God does a little bit better, and not leaning on my own understanding, but in, you know, being able to build a better lifestyle that seeks to find God in every scenario, that accepts adversity and understands that it's here to make me stronger. And every day that I wake up, I'm not just waking up to more work. I'm being chosen to do more work. And in being chosen, it means I have to give that day back to God, and trying to find every day that I can, in every way that I can, every day. So that, in a nutshell, a very large nutshell, y'all, is part 2 of When Jay Met God. I hope y'all were able to glean something from it, man. Even if maybe just enjoy the story, you know, and maybe one day in the future you go through something and you'll be like, man, that's a little bit like what Jay was talking about. And I feel that, you know. So I hope you could take something from it, man. I hope it sticks with y'all. I hope y'all can appreciate my honesty and my openness. All right. Thank you so much for joining me again here on J. Floyd Speaks Life. Join me again, y'all. Next time, same place, right here in the family room. Love y'all. I love y'all. I love y'all.